narrative.
I don't know if I was expecting an apology, maybe an explanation, maybe even some half-hearted attempt at damage control. But when she looked at me and said, "You'll forgive me eventually," I realized she didn't care about giving me any of those things. I had come home earlier than usual, not because I suspected anything, at least not consciously. I just had this feeling, this restless need to be home. I remember opening the door and noticing right away that something was off. The living room lights were dimmed, the kind of lighting she used when she wanted to unwind. But she wasn't on the couch watching TV or curled up with a book. The house was quiet, too quiet. Then I saw her phone on the kitchen counter. She never left it lying around. Never. It was practically an extension of her hand. And yet, there it was, screen still lit up from a recent notification. That was the first real crack in the foundation of my reality. I didn't have to snoop. The message was right there, a preview glowing on the lock screen. Can't stop thinking about last night. I stared at it, my mind rejecting what was in front of me. It didn't make sense. Not her, not us. My hands felt disconnected from my body as I picked up the phone, swiping up instinctively, heart pounding against my ribs. The chat was open. I didn't need to guess who it was. The name didn't matter. The words did. There were no confessions of love, no dramatic exchanges. Just familiarity, comfort, the kind of casual, easygoing intimacy that made it clear. This wasn't new. This wasn't a mistake. This had been happening for a while. Footsteps from the hallway. I turned, still holding the phone, and there she was. No panic, no guilt-ridden stammering. Just a flicker of recognition in her eyes before she sighed, like she'd been waiting for this moment. Like she was relieved it was finally out in the open. And then she said it. That one sentence that burned itself into my memory. "You'll forgive me eventually." It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a question. It was a statement delivered with the same casual certainty as someone announcing that it might rain later. Like it was inevitable. Like she knew me better than I knew myself. I remember laughing, not because it was funny, but because my body didn't know what else to do. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Waiting for me to yell, to cry, to fall apart. I did none of those things. I just looked at her, realizing that I had never really seen her before. Not like this. The woman I married wouldn't have done this. The woman I married wouldn't be standing there, emotionless, as if she had just told me she forgot to pick up milk from the store. But maybe the woman I married never existed. Maybe I had been loving a version of her that only lived in my head. The silence stretched between us. I wanted to ask why, but what would be the point? I had already seen the answer in those messages. It wasn't passion. It wasn't desperation. It was boredom, indifference, a slow, steady detachment that had been happening right under my nose. I finally spoke. My voice didn't shake. "No, I won't." Her eyes flickered, just for a second. Like she hadn't considered that possibility, I set her phone back on the counter and walked past her into the bedroom, because I needed distance, even if it was just a few feet. She didn't follow me. She didn't say another word. And for the first time since I had met her, I had no desire to hear anything else she had to say. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my mind running through every moment that had led to this. Every conversation, every excuse, every late night she spent working, every trip she took alone because she needed space. It was like a switch had flipped in my head, and suddenly everything made sense. I had been a fool. Not because I had trusted her. I don't regret that. I regret ignoring the signs that something was off. I regret believing the little lies she fed me because it was easier than questioning them. Because I didn't want to be that kind of husband, the one who suspects, who accuses, who assumes the worst. But the worst had already been happening. I could hear her moving around in the other room, but I didn't go out there. I didn't want to look at her. I didn't want to see that expression she wore when she had told me I'd forgive her. Like it was just a minor inconvenience in her life, something she could afford to be patient about. I ran through the last few months, dissecting every moment, searching for the exact point when I had lost her, if I ever really had her in the first place. The business trips. That was the first red flag, wasn't it? She had started traveling more, always with some excuse about new clients, important meetings, last-minute changes to her schedule. I had never questioned it. She had always been ambitious, and I had wanted to be supportive. But looking back now, those trips had been more frequent than necessary. She had stopped telling me details, stopped sending me messages while she was away. And when she came back, there had been no excitement, no eagerness to see me, no stories to tell. The nights out. She had never been much of a social person before. We had always been the kind of couple who preferred quiet nights at home over going out. But then suddenly she had friends she needed to see. People from work, from the gym, from places I had never even heard of before. She started coming home later, sometimes not at all, staying at a friend's place because she had too much to drink. And I had believed her. Even when I noticed how she started guarding her phone more carefully, how she would turn the screen away from me, how she would leave the room to answer calls. Then there were the arguments. She had started picking fights over nothing. Tiny, insignificant things that shouldn't have mattered. Why I didn't take out the trash immediately. Why I wasn't ambitious enough at work. Why I wasn't spontaneous anymore. At the time, I had chalked it up to stress, or maybe just growing pains in a long-term relationship. But now I understood. She had been justifying it to herself, convincing herself that she had a reason to do what she was doing. I felt sick. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't some heat-of-the-moment mistake. It had been deliberate, calculated. She had known what she was doing every step of the way, and she had never planned to stop. I clenched my fist, my nails digging into my palms. I wasn't even angry yet. The anger would come later. Right now, all I felt was exhaustion. The kind of exhaustion that sinks into your bones, that makes it hard to even stand up. She had been waiting for me to figure it out. That's what stung the most. She hadn't been careful. She hadn't covered her tracks. She hadn't even tried to hide it properly. Because she had assumed that I wouldn't leave, that I would be hurt, sure, maybe even devastated, but that eventually I would come around. That was her mistake. I wasn't going to be another cliché. I wasn't going to be the guy who pretended everything was fine, who forgave because it was the easier option. I stood up. The next steps weren't clear yet, but one thing was, this marriage was already over. The only thing left was for her to realize it. I don't remember how long I stayed in that bedroom, just standing there, staring at the walls, feeling everything unravel in real time. When I finally walked out, she was sitting at the dining table, casually scrolling through her phone like nothing had happened. Like we hadn't just crossed a line that there was no coming back from. She barely looked up when I passed by. No attempt to smooth things over, no fake remorse, no nervous energy. She wasn't worried. That's what hit me the hardest. She didn't think she had anything to lose. I grabbed my keys and walked out. I needed air. I needed space. I needed to be anywhere but there. But the thing is, you can't outrun something like this. It follows you. It seeps into your skin, into your thoughts, into the spaces between your ribs. I drove without direction, ended up in some parking lot, staring at the dashboard like it held answers. I could have stayed out all night, but when I finally went back home, she was already asleep, as if this was just another night, as if everything was business as usual. And for a while, I let it be. Not because I forgave her, not because I wanted to fix anything, but because I needed to see what she would do next. If she would break the silence, if she would try to explain, if she would at least pretend to care. She didn't. The next morning, she went about her routine like nothing had changed. Coffee, emails, a quick glance at the weather. I sat across from her, watching, waiting. Nothing. Not a single word about what had happened. No hesitation, no guilt, not even an attempt at small talk. I tested it. I didn't say anything either. I wanted to see how long she could keep up the act, how long she could pretend that the previous night hadn't cracked something fundamental between us. Days passed, the silence stretched. She still came home late, still kept her phone close, still acted like I was just part of the furniture, something she had grown used to, something she didn't have to think about. But everything was different for me. Our home, the one place that had always been mine, now felt like a stranger's house. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier. Even the way the sunlight came through the windows seemed wrong, like it was exposing something I hadn't noticed before. I stopped eating at the table with her. I stopped responding to her half-hearted questions about my day. I stopped pretending that we were just in some temporary rough patch. Because this wasn't temporary. This was the aftermath. And I wasn't sure how much longer I could stand living inside of it. She just went on as if the silence between us wasn't suffocating, as if my absence from our bed didn't matter, as if she hadn't set fire to everything we had built and expected me to just live in the ashes. So I forced it. It wasn't planned. I wasn't waiting for the right moment. The right moment had passed the second she had looked me in the eye and told me I'd forgive her. I just walked in one evening, saw her sitting on the couch with her laptop and said, "We need to talk." She didn't even look up right away. Just finished typing something before closing the screen. Like she was doing me a favor by giving me her attention. Okay. That was it. No hesitation, no concern, just that empty, indifferent okay. I sat across from her. I was done playing her game. "How long?" I asked. Her lips pressed together slightly, just enough to tell me she wasn't expecting that question. "Does it matter?" I let out a short, humorless laugh. "Yeah, it does." She sighed, finally leaning back, crossing her arms. "A while." I nodded. I had already known that, but hearing it from her made it settle in a different way. "Why?" She tilted her head, studying me like I had asked something complicated. "Because I could." I blinked. "That's it?" She shrugged. "What do you want me to say? That I was unhappy? That I felt trapped? Would that make you feel better?" It wasn't what she was saying that hit me. It was how she was saying it, like she had no interest in softening the blow. Like she had already accepted that I knew the truth and had no reason to dress it up. "You didn't even try to hide it," I said, shaking my head. "Did you want me to find out?" A pause, then. "I didn't care if you did." I just stared at her. I had spent so much time trying to understand why. Why she had done it. Why she had stayed. Why she had looked at me that night and assumed I would eventually forgive her. But I realized in that moment, I had been asking the wrong questions. She hadn't done this because she was lost, or because she was in love with someone else, or because she was searching for something she couldn't find in our marriage. She had done it because I had never been a factor in her decision-making at all. I wasn't someone she had betrayed. I was just someone who happened to find out. Something inside me clicked into place then. The last piece of whatever hold she had over me finally snapped. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees, looking her dead in the eyes. "You think I'm going to stay?" Her expression didn't change. "You think I'll move past this? That I'll wake up one day and decide this isn't worth throwing everything away for?" Nothing. No reaction. "You're wrong." That was the first time I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. Not regret, not fear, just surprise. Like she had never even considered that she might have miscalculated. That flicker of surprise in her eyes was gone as fast as it had come. She recovered quickly, settling back into that cold, detached confidence. The same look she had given me the night she told me I'd forgive her. Like she was still convinced that none of this would truly change anything. She thought she knew me. She thought I would yell, break something, demand explanations, maybe even threaten to leave, but that in the end I would stay. She had no idea what was coming. I stood up, didn't argue, didn't ask any more questions. I had everything I needed. I grabbed my jacket from the chair and walked past her without another word. "Where are you going?" she asked, finally showing a sliver of curiosity. I didn't answer. I didn't even slow down, because this wasn't her game anymore. That night I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind was too sharp, too clear. I had spent weeks, maybe even months, living in the fog of this slow-motion disaster. But now I knew exactly what had to be done. I didn't want revenge. I didn't need some dramatic explosion of anger or a carefully crafted scheme to make her pay. She had already lost me, whether she realized it yet or not. That was enough. What I wanted was freedom. I called a lawyer first thing in the morning. I had no idea what I was walking into. Divorce wasn't something I had ever thought I'd have to navigate, but I was done wasting time, done pretending there was anything left to salvage. The paperwork, the assets, the legal procedures. I was ready for all of it. I was ready to make this real. She still didn't see it coming. She noticed the shift, of course. Anyone would have. I stopped playing along with her charade. I stopped giving her the silent treatment like I was waiting for something. I stopped reacting to anything she did. She wasn't the center of my life anymore. I could see the way it threw her off, the way she expected tension, anger, some kind of emotional eruption. But there was nothing left in me for her to manipulate. And then came the moment she hadn't been prepared for. I came home one evening, dropped a stack of documents onto the kitchen counter, and slid them across to her. "You need to sign." She looked down at the papers, then back at me, still too calm, still thinking she had some kind of control. "You're serious?" I pulled out a pen and set it beside her hand. "Completely." She hesitated. That was new. She had spent so much time convincing herself that this was just a phase for me, that my anger would fade, that eventually I would come back to the version of myself she had grown comfortable with, the one who let things go. She finally understood that wasn't happening. For the first time, she was the one scrambling for words. "We don't have to rush into this," she said, her voice measured, careful. "We can take some time to—" "No." Her mouth snapped shut. This was the moment, the one where she realized that I wasn't making threats, wasn't playing games. This was final. I saw something flicker across her face then, something close to fear. Not fear of losing me, not fear of what she had done, but fear of losing control. She wasn't the one calling the shots anymore. She had always assumed she would be the one to decide how the story ended, that I would stay long enough for her to decide when she was ready to leave, that even if I walked away, it would be because she allowed it. She had been wrong, and I wasn't going to waste another second proving it to her. She didn't sign the papers right away. I knew she wouldn't. It wasn't about love, guilt, or regret. It was about power. For the first time since this whole mess started, she wasn't the one in control, and that unsettled her more than anything else. Days passed. She tried to shift the dynamic, to pull me back in. Suddenly, she was more present, more engaged, asking about my day, making conversation like nothing had happened. Small, calculated gestures that felt so obviously forced it was almost insulting. One evening, she cooked dinner, a meal she knew I liked. She set the table, poured us both a glass of wine, and sat across from me with that same self-assured expression, the same one she had when she said I'd forgive her. "We don't have to do this," she said, swirling the wine in her glass. "We can fix things." I let her talk. I let her say everything she thought I needed to hear. That she had made mistakes, that relationships go through phases, that I was acting out of anger, and anger fades. And then she said it. "This doesn't have to be the end." I set my fork down and looked at her. "It already is." She held my gaze, waiting for me to crack, waiting for hesitation, for a flicker of doubt. There was none. And that's when it hit her. Not the loss, not yet, but the certainty, the realization that no matter what she said, no matter what excuses she tried to feed me, I wasn't listening anymore. She wasn't special. She wasn't untouchable. She wasn't the exception. She was just someone who made a choice. And now she was facing the consequences. The next morning, she signed the papers. Not because she wanted to, not because she had accepted it, but because she knew that dragging it out wouldn't bring me back. She tried to keep her composure, but I saw the way her hand tightened around the pen, the way her signature came out slightly uneven. She slid the papers back to me and finally asked the question she had been avoiding from the start. "Is this really what you want?" I picked up the papers, folded them neatly, and stood. "No, but it's what I need." She had been wrong about me. I didn't forgive her, and I never would. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.